Question 1. Strategic planning requires a real estate licensee in Arkansas to accurately estimate a property's market value. For standard single-family residence in a well-established neighborhood, which property valuation method, when applied correctly, best reflects current market conditions and buyer preferences for the purpose of advising a seller on an appropriate listing price? Option A. Income approach. Option B. Replacement cost method. Option C. Cost approach. Option D. Comparative market analysis. The correct answer is D. Comparative market analysis. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of property valuation methods to accurately advise clients and comply with Arkansas real estate licensing laws. This scenario is professionally challenging because a licensee must select the most appropriate valuation method based on the specific property type and client needs, while also adhering to ethical standards and legal requirements for providing reliable information. Misapplication of a valuation method can lead to misinformed decisions by the client, potential financial harm, and disciplinary action from the Arkansas Real Estate Commission, AREC. The most appropriate approach in this scenario is the comparative market analysis, CMA. A CMA is a method used by real estate professionals to determine the market value of a property by comparing it to similar recently sold properties in the same geographic area. This approach is correct because it directly reflects current market conditions and buyer behavior, which is crucial for advising a seller on an appropriate listing price. Arkansas real estate licensees are expected to provide competent and diligent service, which includes using valuation methods that are relevant and reliable for the specific property and market. AREC regulations emphasize the importance of providing accurate and truthful information to clients. A CMA, when performed correctly with comparable properties that are truly similar in size, condition, features, and location, offers the most direct and practical insight into what a buyer is likely willing to pay in the current Arkansas market. Using the income approach would be professionally unacceptable in this scenario. The income approach is primarily used for investment properties, where the value is derived from the potential income the property can generate. Applying this to a typical single-family home intended for owner occupancy would be inappropriate and misleading, as it does not reflect the primary motivations of most residential buyers. This failure to use a relevant valuation method constitutes a lack of competence and diligence, violating AREC standards of practice. The cost approach would also be professionally unacceptable. The cost approach estimates the value of a property by calculating the cost to replace or reproduce the building, minus depreciation, plus the value of the land. While useful for unique properties, new construction, or insurance purposes, it is often less reliable for older homes or in established neighborhoods where market comparables are readily available. Relying solely on the cost approach for a standard residential sale in Arkansas, without considering current market demand and recent sales of similar properties, would fail to provide the seller with a realistic understanding of its market value, potentially leading to overpricing or underpricing, and thus failing to meet the duty of care owed to the client. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client needs and regulatory compliance. This involves first understanding the client's objective, e.g., selling a home, investing. Then, identifying the property type and its characteristics. Next, determining which valuation method, S, are most suitable for that property type and market context. Finally, executing the chosen method, S, with diligence and accuracy, and clearly communicating the findings and limitations to the client, ensuring all actions align with AREC regulations and ethical obligations. Question 2. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of increased interest rates impacting future resale values for a commercial property in Little Rock, Arkansas. Your client, a first-time investor, is eager to purchase the property quickly to capitalize on current market demand, and has asked you to focus your analysis primarily on the potential for immediate rental income generation. Which approach best aligns with your professional obligations as a licensed real estate salesperson in Arkansas? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive investment analysis that includes projections for rental income, operating expenses, potential appreciation, and the impact of interest rate fluctuations on resale value, presenting a balanced view of potential risks and rewards. Option B. Emphasize the immediate rental income potential, downplaying the risk of increased interest rates and focusing solely on the client's stated desire for quick profit. Option C. Advise the client to proceed with the purchase based on your personal positive experiences with similar commercial properties, without a formal, objective analysis of this specific investment. Option D. Rely entirely on the seller's provided rental income figures and market commentary, without conducting independent verification or further analysis. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive investment analysis that includes projections for rental income, operating expenses, potential appreciation, and the impact of interest rate fluctuations on resale value, presenting a balanced view of potential risks and rewards. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to balance the client's desire for a quick profit with the ethical and regulatory obligation to provide accurate and comprehensive investment analysis. The salesperson must avoid misrepresenting potential returns or downplaying risks, which could lead to a violation of Arkansas Real Estate Commission (AREC) regulations and potentially expose both the client and the salesperson to legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the analysis presented is objective and reflects the realities of real estate investment, even if it doesn't align with the client's immediate expectations. The best approach involves conducting a thorough and objective real estate investment analysis that considers all relevant factors impacting potential returns and risks. This includes evaluating market conditions, property condition, potential rental income, operating expenses, financing costs, and potential appreciation. The salesperson should present a balanced view, highlighting both potential upside and downside scenarios, and clearly communicate that past performance is not indicative of future results. This aligns with AREC mandate for licensees to act with honesty, integrity, and competence, and to avoid misrepresentation or concealment of material facts, as outlined in Arkansas Code Annotated Title 17, Chapter 93. Providing a realistic assessment protects the client from making uninformed decisions and upholds the salesperson's professional integrity. Presenting an analysis that solely focuses on the most optimistic projections without acknowledging potential downsides is an ethical failure. This approach misrepresents the investment's potential and violates the duty to provide accurate information. It can lead the client to make decisions based on unrealistic expectations, potentially resulting in financial loss and a breach of trust. Such actions could be construed as deceptive practices under AREC regulations. Another incorrect approach is to rely exclusively on the seller's provided financial projections without independent verification. While sellers may provide data, licensees have a responsibility to conduct due diligence and verify information to the best of their ability. Failing to do so and presenting unverified data as fact can lead to misrepresentation if those projections prove inaccurate. This demonstrates a lack of competence and diligence, which are expected of licensed professionals in Arkansas. Finally, recommending the investment based on anecdotal evidence or the salesperson's personal positive experiences with similar properties, without a formal, objective analysis, is also professionally unsound. Real estate investments are unique, and past successes in one situation do not guarantee success in another. This approach lacks the rigor required for sound investment advice and can lead to poor client outcomes, potentially violating AREC standards of practice by failing to provide competent service. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing client education and objective analysis. This involves understanding the client's investment goals, conducting thorough research, utilizing appropriate analytical tools, even if conceptual, and presenting findings in a clear, unbiased manner. The decision-making process should always involve a commitment to transparency, honesty, and adherence to all applicable Arkansas real estate laws and ethical guidelines. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates that a real estate salesperson in Arkansas has been informed by the seller that a property has a significant foundation issue that has been present for several years. The salesperson is preparing to list the property and market it to potential buyers. What is the most appropriate course of action for the salesperson to ensure compliance with Arkansas real estate law and ethical obligations? Option A. Advise the seller to attempt repairs before listing, and then omit any mention of the past foundation issue to potential buyers. Option B. Verbally inform potential buyers about the foundation issue during showings, but refrain from providing any written documentation. Option C. Downplay the severity of the foundation issue to potential buyers, hoping it will not be a significant concern for them. Option D. Promptly disclose the known foundation issue in writing to all prospective buyers, ensuring they are fully informed about the material defect. The correct answer is D. Promptly disclose the known foundation issue in writing to all prospective buyers, ensuring they are fully informed about the material defect. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to navigate the delicate balance between client interests and legal disclosure obligations, particularly when a known material defect exists. The salesperson must act with integrity and adhere strictly to Arkansas real estate law to avoid legal repercussions and maintain professional standing. The correct approach involves promptly and fully disclosing the known material defect to all prospective buyers, in writing, as required by Arkansas law. This ensures transparency and allows buyers to make informed decisions. Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-307 mandates that licensees must disclose all known material defects to prospective buyers. This proactive disclosure protects the seller by fulfilling legal obligations and also protects the buyer by providing essential information. Ethically, it upholds the principle of honesty and fair dealing. An incorrect approach would be to downplay or omit the mention of the foundation issue, hoping it won't be discovered or that the buyer won't pursue it. This directly violates Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-307 by failing to disclose a known material defect. Such an omission constitutes misrepresentation and could lead to significant legal liability for the salesperson and the brokerage, including potential lawsuits for damages and disciplinary action from the Arkansas Real Estate Commission. Another incorrect approach is to only verbally inform potential buyers about the foundation issue without providing any written documentation. While verbal disclosure might seem sufficient, Arkansas law and professional best practices strongly favor written disclosures for material defects. This is because verbal statements are difficult to prove and can be easily misconstrued or forgotten, leaving the salesperson vulnerable to claims of non-disclosure. Relying solely on verbal communication fails to create a clear record of disclosure, which is crucial for legal protection and demonstrating compliance. A further incorrect approach is to suggest to the seller that they attempt to repair the foundation without disclosing the issue to buyers. While the seller has the right to make repairs, the salesperson's duty to disclose known material defects to buyers remains irrespective of any repairs undertaken or contemplated by the seller. Failing to disclose the original defect, even if repairs are planned, is a violation of the disclosure obligation. The buyer has a right to know about the history of material defects, even if they have been addressed, to fully assess the property's condition and value. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency and adherence to legal mandates. When faced with a known material defect, the immediate step should be to consult the property disclosure forms and relevant Arkansas statutes. The salesperson must then document the defect and ensure it is clearly communicated in writing to all potential buyers, ideally through an addendum to the purchase agreement or a separate disclosure document, before any offer is made or accepted. This systematic approach ensures compliance, protects all parties, and upholds professional integrity. Question 4. System analysis indicates a real estate salesperson in Arkansas is presented with a property that features a large building complex with specialized machinery for the assembly of electronic components, along with associated warehousing and distribution facilities. The property is situated on a significant acreage. Based on the primary economic activity and intended use, how should this property be classified according to Arkansas real estate principles? Option A, industrial real estate. Option B, agricultural real estate. Option C, mixed-use real estate. Option D, commercial real estate. The correct answer is A, industrial real estate. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to accurately identify the primary classification of a property based on its intended use and potential revenue generation, which directly impacts the licensing requirements and the scope of services they can legally offer. Misclassifying a property can lead to violations of Arkansas real estate law, potential disciplinary action from the Arkansas Real Estate Commission, AREC, and damage to the salesperson's professional reputation. The distinction between commercial and industrial properties, while sometimes overlapping, hinges on the primary activity conducted on the land and the nature of the improvements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of the property's current and intended use, focusing on the primary economic activity. In this case, the property's primary purpose is the manufacturing and assembly of goods, which is the defining characteristic of industrial real estate. This classification dictates the specialized knowledge, marketing strategies, and regulatory considerations applicable to industrial properties under Arkansas law. A salesperson must be able to discern this primary use to ensure they are operating within their expertise and adhering to ARIC guidelines for the specific property type. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to classify the property as commercial solely because it involves business operations and generates revenue. While commercial properties also involve business, the distinction lies in the nature of the business. Commercial real estate typically involves retail, office, or service-based enterprises, whereas industrial real estate is centered on production, manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution. Failing to recognize the manufacturing focus leads to a misapplication of marketing and negotiation strategies, potentially violating ARIC regulations by practicing outside the scope of expertise for that property type. Another incorrect approach is to consider the property as agricultural because it is located on a large parcel of land. While agricultural land is a distinct category of real estate, the presence of manufacturing facilities clearly supersedes any agricultural use. Classifying it as agricultural would ignore the dominant and intended use of the property, leading to significant misrepresentation and potential legal issues, as well as a failure to comply with ARIC expectations for accurate property classification. A further incorrect approach is to broadly categorize the property as mixed use, without a clear understanding of the dominant use. While some properties can have multiple uses, the primary function of manufacturing and assembly clearly defines this property as industrial. A vague mixed-use classification without further specificity would not align with the detailed property type definitions required by ARIC, and could lead to confusion and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic approach to property classification. This involves 1. Identifying the primary current and intended use of the property. 2. Researching the specific definitions and regulations pertaining to different real estate types as defined by the Arkansas Real Estate Commission. 3. Consulting with experienced professionals or appraisers if there is any ambiguity. 4. Clearly communicating the property's classification and the rationale behind it to all parties involved. This methodical process ensures compliance, ethical practice, and effective service delivery. Question 5. The performance metrics show a consistent need for enhanced foundational knowledge among new Arkansas real estate salespersons. Considering the definition and importance of real estate in Arkansas, which of the following best describes the essential understanding a salesperson must possess? Option A. Real estate is primarily the physical land itself, with improvements being secondary considerations for valuation. Option B. Importance of real estate lies solely in its potential for quick resale and profit generation for the client. Option C. Real estate encompasses land, its permanent improvements, and the associated bundle of rights, which forms the basis for all client representation and transaction facilitation. Option D. A salesperson's main role is to complete transactions efficiently, with the precise definition of real estate being less critical than closing the deal. The correct answer is C. Real estate encompasses land, its permanent improvements, and the associated bundle of rights, which forms the basis for all client representation and transaction facilitation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a salesperson to navigate the fundamental definition of real estate in Arkansas, while simultaneously understanding its broad implications for client representation and transaction integrity. A salesperson must grasp that real estate is not merely land, but includes the improvements and the bundle of rights associated with ownership, which directly impacts their fiduciary duties and the scope of their services. The best approach involves clearly defining real estate as encompassing land, its permanent improvements, and the associated rights, and then explaining how this definition underpins the salesperson's role in facilitating transactions involving these components. This aligns with the Arkansas Real Estate License Law and Commission rules, which implicitly and explicitly define real estate broadly to ensure consumer protection and professional conduct. Understanding this definition is crucial for accurately advising clients, properly listing properties, and ensuring all aspects of a transaction are legally sound and ethically managed. It forms the bedrock of a salesperson's competence and trustworthiness. An approach that narrowly defines real estate solely as the physical land is incorrect, because it fails to acknowledge the significant value and legal implications of improvements, buildings, fences, etc. And the crucial concept of the bundle of rights, possession, control, enjoyment, exclusion, disposition. This limited understanding could lead to misrepresentation, incomplete property disclosures, and ultimately, legal liabilities for the salesperson and dissatisfaction for the client. Another incorrect approach is to focus only on the transactional aspect without grounding it in the definition of real estate. While closing a deal is the ultimate goal, the salesperson's duty is to facilitate a transaction involving a clearly defined asset. Omitting the foundational definition means the salesperson might not fully appreciate what they are marketing or selling, potentially overlooking critical aspects of the property or the client's rights. Finally, an approach that prioritizes commission earnings over a thorough understanding of the real estate definition is ethically and legally unsound. Arkansas law mandates that licensees act in the best interest of their clients. Focus on personal gain without a solid grasp of the subject matter being transacted directly violates this principle and undermines the integrity of the real estate profession. Professionals should approach situations by first ensuring a robust understanding of core legal and ethical definitions relevant to their practice. This foundational knowledge then guides all subsequent actions, from client consultation to transaction execution, ensuring compliance with Arkansas real estate license law and commission rules, and upholding their fiduciary responsibilities. Question 6. The assessment process reveals that a tenant in an Arkansas rental property has repeatedly reported a persistent leak in their bathroom ceiling, which is causing visible water damage and a musty odor. The landlord has expressed concern about the cost of repairs and has suggested waiting until the next scheduled maintenance visit or attempting a temporary fix themselves. What is the most appropriate course of action for the property manager to take, considering Arkansas property management regulations? Option A. Immediately schedule a licensed professional to assess and repair the leak, documenting all communications and actions with both the tenant and the landlord, and informing the landlord of their legal obligations under Arkansas law regarding habitability. Option B. Advise the tenant that repairs will be made during the next scheduled maintenance visit, as the landlord wishes to minimize immediate expenses, and suggest the tenant use towels to manage the water. Option C. Inform the tenant that they are responsible for addressing minor leaks themselves as per standard lease terms and that the landlord will not cover the cost of this repair. Option D. Suggest the landlord attempt a temporary patch-up job themselves to see if the leak stops, and if it persists, then consider professional repair at a later date. The correct answer is A. Immediately schedule a licensed professional to assess and repair the leak, documenting all communications and actions with both the tenant and the landlord, and informing the landlord of their legal obligations under Arkansas law regarding habitability. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in property management, balancing the landlord's desire for maximum return with the tenant's right to a safe and habitable living environment, all within the specific legal framework of Arkansas. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Arkansas landlord-tenant laws, fair housing regulations, and ethical obligations to both parties. Misinterpreting or neglecting these can lead to legal disputes, financial penalties, and damage to professional reputation. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests effectively and legally. The best approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy, coupled with diligent adherence to Arkansas's property maintenance laws. This means promptly addressing reported maintenance issues by scheduling necessary repairs with qualified professionals, documenting all communications and actions taken, and ensuring that repairs are completed to a standard that complies with Arkansas Code Title 18, Chapter 16, which governs landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities, including the landlord's duty to maintain the premises. This approach prioritizes tenant well-being and legal compliance, thereby mitigating risks for the landlord and fostering a positive landlord-tenant relationship. An approach that delays addressing the tenant's concerns, citing the landlord's reluctance to incur immediate costs, is ethically and legally flawed. Arkansas law implies a covenant of quiet enjoyment and a duty for landlords to maintain the property in good repair. Unreasonable delays in addressing habitability issues can be considered a breach of this duty, potentially allowing the tenant legal recourse, such as rent withholding or lease termination, as outlined in Arkansas Code Title 18, Chapter 16. Furthermore, ignoring tenant complaints without proper documentation or a clear plan for resolution can lead to accusations of negligence and potential fair housing violations if the issues disproportionately affect certain protected classes. Another unacceptable approach is to perform only superficial repairs that do not resolve the underlying problem. This not only fails to meet the landlord's legal obligation to maintain the property in a habitable condition, but also creates a cycle of recurring issues, increasing tenant dissatisfaction and the likelihood of future legal action. Arkansas law expects repairs to be substantive and effective, not merely cosmetic. Finally, attempting to shift the responsibility for repairs directly to the tenant without a clear lease provision or legal justification is also problematic. While leases can outline tenant responsibilities for minor maintenance, significant repairs impacting habitability are generally the landlord's duty under Arkansas law. Such an approach circumvents legal obligations and can lead to disputes over lease interpretation and landlord responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific legal requirements of Arkansas landlord-tenant law. When a maintenance issue is reported, the professional should immediately assess its severity, consult the lease agreement for relevant clauses, and communicate transparently with both the tenant and the landlord. The priority should always be to address issues that affect habitability and safety promptly and in compliance with state law, documenting every step of the process. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a potential for significant economic downturn impacting the Arkansas real estate market. As a licensed real estate salesperson in Arkansas, how should you best advise a seller who is eager to list their property immediately, given these potential economic headwinds? Option A. Provide the seller with speculative forecasts about future market recovery, suggesting they hold off on listing until a more opportune time based on these predictions. Option B. Focus solely on securing the listing and initiating the marketing process as quickly as possible to capitalize on any immediate buyer interest, deferring detailed economic discussions until later. Option C. Assure the seller that the Arkansas market is resilient and unlikely to be significantly affected by broader economic trends, encouraging them to proceed with listing at their desired price. Option D. Proactively educate the seller on current and projected economic factors affecting the Arkansas market, discuss their potential impact on property values and buyer demand, and collaboratively develop a realistic pricing and marketing strategy. The correct answer is D. Proactively educate the seller on current and projected economic factors affecting the Arkansas market, discuss their potential impact on property values and buyer demand, and collaboratively develop a realistic pricing and marketing strategy. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for significant economic downturn impacting the Arkansas real estate market. This scenario is professionally challenging because real estate agents must navigate fluctuating market conditions while upholding their fiduciary duties to clients and adhering to Arkansas Real Estate Commission (AREC) regulations. Misjudging economic impacts can lead to poor client advice, potentially resulting in financial losses for buyers and sellers, and damage to the agent's reputation and license. The best approach involves proactively educating clients about current and projected economic factors affecting the Arkansas market, such as interest rate trends, employment figures, and local development projects. This includes discussing how these factors might influence property values, buyer demand, and seller expectations. Agents should then help clients develop realistic pricing strategies and negotiation approaches based on this informed understanding. This aligns with AREC Rule 10A, which mandates that licensees shall not mislead or deceive any party in a real estate transaction and shall exercise reasonable care and competence. Providing accurate, market-informed advice is a core component of this duty. An incorrect approach would be to downplay or ignore the potential negative economic impacts, assuring clients that the market will remain strong regardless of broader economic trends. This fails to meet the duty of care and competence required by ARIC Rule 10A, and could be considered misleading or deceptive if the agent has reason to believe otherwise. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on securing a quick sale without thoroughly discussing the economic implications with the client. This prioritizes the agent's commission over the client's best interests and violates the fiduciary duty of loyalty and diligence. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to provide speculative or unsubstantiated predictions about future market performance without grounding them in current economic data and expert analysis. This can lead to unrealistic client expectations and potential harm, contravening the principle of providing competent and informed advice as expected by ARIC regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of current economic indicators relevant to the Arkansas real estate market. This understanding should then be translated into clear, actionable advice for clients, always prioritizing their best interests and ensuring compliance with ARIC rules regarding honesty, competence, and disclosure. Regular professional development in market analysis and economic forecasting is crucial for maintaining this standard. Question 8. Compliance review shows that an Arkansas licensed real estate salesperson is representing a seller in a listing agreement. A potential buyer who has previously expressed interest in properties listed by the same salesperson has now expressed strong interest in purchasing the seller's property. What is the salesperson's immediate and most critical obligation under Arkansas real estate law? Option A. Inform the buyer that they should seek independent representation without disclosing the salesperson's existing relationship with the seller. Option B. Proceed with showing the property to the buyer and facilitate negotiations, assuming the buyer will understand the salesperson's role. Option C. Inform the seller that the buyer is interested but do not mention the salesperson's prior relationship with the buyer and continue to represent the seller exclusively. Option D. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest to both the buyer and the seller and seek their informed written consent to proceed, potentially as a dual agent. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest to both the buyer and the seller and seek their informed written consent to proceed, potentially as a dual agent. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to navigate the ethical and legal implications of a potential dual agency situation without proper disclosure and consent. The challenge lies in upholding fiduciary duties to both parties while avoiding conflicts of interest, which is a cornerstone of real estate law in Arkansas. Failure to do so can lead to legal repercussions, disciplinary action by the Arkansas Real Estate Commission (ARIC), and damage to professional reputation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to both the buyer and the seller. This approach aligns with the principles of honesty, fair dealing, and the fiduciary duties owed to clients as mandated by Arkansas Real Estate License Law and ARIC regulations. Specifically, Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-307 requires licensees to disclose all material facts, and this includes disclosing any potential conflicts of interest that could affect their representation. Obtaining informed written consent from both parties before proceeding with any transaction where dual agency might arise is crucial. This ensures transparency and protects both the buyer and seller, as well as the licensee. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the transaction without informing either party about the potential dual agency. This violates the duty of full disclosure required by Arkansas law and ARIC rules. It creates a secret conflict of interest, potentially compromising the salesperson's ability to represent each party's best interests impartially. Another incorrect approach is to inform only one party of the potential dual agency, while continuing to represent the other without their explicit, informed consent. This is a partial disclosure and still constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty and a violation of disclosure requirements. It unfairly disadvantages the party who is not fully informed and does not have the opportunity to consent to the arrangement. A further incorrect approach is to advise the buyer to seek independent representation without informing the seller of the salesperson's existing relationship with them. While encouraging independent counsel is often good practice, failing to disclose the existing seller relationship to the buyer's new agent or to the seller themselves creates a misleading situation and fails to address the core issue of potential dual agency and the need for informed consent from all parties involved in the transaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize transparency and informed consent. When a situation arises that could create a conflict of interest, such as the potential for dual agency, the immediate and full disclosure to all parties involved is paramount. This should be followed by obtaining written consent before proceeding. If consent cannot be obtained from all parties, the licensee must decline to represent one or both parties to avoid a conflict. This systematic approach ensures compliance with legal obligations and ethical standards, safeguarding the integrity of the transaction and the professional's license. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that a real estate agent in Arkansas failed to adequately address potential environmental concerns associated with a commercial property they listed, leading to a post-closing dispute with the buyer. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate professional response to prevent such issues in the future? Option A. Implement a standardized pre-listing checklist that includes questions about past environmental uses of the property and advises sellers to obtain a Phase I environmental site assessment (ESSA) if any red flags are identified, and to disclose all findings to potential buyers. Option B. Advise sellers that environmental due diligence is solely the buyer's responsibility, and that the agent will not proactively investigate or disclose any potential environmental issues. Option C. Rely solely on the seller's verbal assurances regarding the environmental condition of the property, and avoid recommending any independent environmental assessments. Option D. Minimize any known or suspected environmental concerns to the seller and buyer to ensure a smooth and timely closing. The correct answer is A. Implement a standardized pre-listing checklist that includes questions about past environmental uses of the property and advises sellers to obtain a Phase I environmental site assessment (ESSA) if any red flags are identified, and to disclose all findings to potential buyers. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in due diligence regarding environmental disclosures for a property in Arkansas. This scenario is professionally challenging because real estate professionals in Arkansas are bound by specific disclosure requirements that extend to environmental hazards, and failure to adhere to these can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions. The challenge lies in balancing the agent's duty to their client with the legal obligation to disclose material facts that could affect a buyer's decision. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and disclosing potential environmental concerns, even if they are not definitively confirmed. This aligns with the Arkansas Real Estate License Law and Commission regulations, which mandate the disclosure of known material defects. A proactive approach, such as recommending a Phase I environmental site assessment (ESSA) to the seller or buyer, demonstrates a commitment to transparency and risk mitigation. This approach fulfills the agent's ethical duty to act in the best interest of their client, while also complying with legal disclosure obligations by ensuring potential buyers are informed of material environmental considerations that could impact the property's value or usability. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit findings and proceed with the sale without further investigation or disclosure. This directly violates the Arkansas Real Estate License Law's requirement to disclose known material defects. Another incorrect approach is to downplay or minimize the potential environmental concerns to the buyer, hoping the transaction will close quickly. This constitutes a misrepresentation and a breach of fiduciary duty. Finally, suggesting that the buyer is solely responsible for investigating environmental issues without the seller or their agent providing any relevant information or facilitating necessary assessments is also professionally deficient, as it fails to meet the disclosure obligations of the listing agent and potentially the buyer's agent. Professionals should adopt a framework of informed consent and material fact disclosure. This involves a thorough understanding of Arkansas's environmental disclosure laws, a commitment to identifying potential red flags, and a willingness to facilitate necessary investigations and disclosures to ensure all parties are making informed decisions. When in doubt, err on the side of disclosure and professional consultation. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a property in Little Rock, Arkansas is leased starting on March 15th. The monthly rent is $1,200. If the lease agreement specifies that rent is prorated for partial months, what is the correct amount of rent due for the partial month of March, assuming March has 31 days? Option A, $600.00. Option B, $612.90. Option C, $590.32. Option D, $580.65. The correct answer is D, $580.65. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that this scenario is professionally challenging due to the need for precise financial calculations within the context of Arkansas real estate lease agreements, specifically concerning prorated rent. Miscalculations can lead to financial disputes between landlords and tenants, potentially resulting in legal action and damage to a licensee's reputation and brokerage. Adherence to Arkansas law and ethical best practices is paramount. The correct approach involves accurately calculating the daily rent and then prorating it for the specific number of days the tenant occupies the property during the partial month. This method ensures that the tenant only pays for the days they actually occupy the premises, aligning with principles of fairness and common practice in prorating rent. Arkansas law, while not prescribing a specific proration formula, generally supports equitable distribution of rent based on occupancy. This approach is ethically sound as it reflects the actual value of the rental period. An incorrect approach involves simply dividing the monthly rent by 30 days and multiplying by the number of days in the partial month, regardless of the actual number of days in that specific month. This fails to account for the varying lengths of months, 28, 29, 30, or 31 days, and can lead to overcharging or undercharging the tenant, violating principles of fairness and potentially Arkansas landlord-tenant guidelines that imply equitable charges. Another incorrect approach is to round the daily rent calculation to the nearest dollar before prorating. This introduces inaccuracies and can result in a financial discrepancy, however small. Professional practice demands precision in financial transactions, and rounding can lead to disputes over even minor amounts, undermining trust and potentially violating the spirit of fair dealing expected of Arkansas real estate licensees. A further incorrect approach is to use the previous month's rent as a basis for calculation if the lease term begins mid-month. This is fundamentally flawed as it does not reflect the actual rental period for the current lease. Rent is typically calculated based on the terms of the active lease agreement for the period of occupancy. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves 1. Understanding the specific terms of the lease agreement regarding rent commencement and proration. 2. Identifying the exact number of days in the partial rental month. 3. Applying a precise daily rent calculation method, monthly rent divided by the actual number of days in that month. 4. Multiplying the daily rent by the number of days of occupancy. 5. Clearly documenting the proration calculation for both parties. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that a real estate salesperson in Arkansas, when assisting a buyer with a property purchase, has been primarily guiding the buyer towards a specific mortgage lender without fully exploring other options or ensuring the buyer understands the full spectrum of financing available. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound approach for the salesperson to take in this situation moving forward? Option A. Continue to recommend the preferred lender, emphasizing their perceived ability to secure favorable loan terms, and assist the buyer in completing that lender's application. Option B. Provide the buyer with a diverse list of reputable local mortgage lenders and strongly encourage them to obtain pre-approval from multiple institutions to compare loan terms and rates. Option C. Suggest that the buyer work with a less established lender who has offered to waive certain origination fees, as this could lead to immediate cost savings for the buyer. Option D. Advise the buyer that they can likely secure a loan with a specific interest rate and down payment percentage, based on the salesperson's general market knowledge, and encourage them to proceed with that expectation. The correct answer is B. Provide the buyer with a diverse list of reputable local mortgage lenders and strongly encourage them to obtain pre-approval from multiple institutions to compare loan terms and rates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent responsibility of a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to accurately represent financing options to potential buyers. Misrepresenting or failing to adequately explain loan terms can lead to significant financial harm for the buyer, potential legal action against the salesperson and brokerage, and damage to professional reputation. The complexity of mortgage products and the varying financial literacy of clients necessitate a high degree of diligence and ethical conduct. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves proactively providing the buyer with a comprehensive list of reputable local lenders and encouraging them to obtain pre-approval. This strategy aligns with the Arkansas Real Estate License Law and Commission rules, which emphasize honesty, fairness, and the duty to disclose material facts. By directing the buyer to qualified professionals and facilitating their engagement with lenders, the salesperson fulfills their obligation to assist the buyer in understanding financing without overstepping their expertise or making unsupported claims. This approach ensures the buyer receives accurate, personalized financial advice from licensed mortgage professionals, thereby mitigating risk for all parties. Incorrect approach is analysis, recommending a specific lender based solely on a personal relationship or a perceived best deal, without a thorough understanding of the buyer's specific financial situation, and the lender's offerings is ethically problematic and potentially violates Arkansas regulations. This could be construed as steering or an undisclosed referral fee. Depending on the circumstances, it places the salesperson in a position of providing financial advice, which they are not licensed to do, and may not be in the buyer's best interest. Suggesting that the buyer can secure a loan with terms that are not readily available or are highly improbable, even if the salesperson believes it might be possible, constitutes misrepresentation. This directly contravenes the duty of honesty and fair dealing required by Arkansas law. Such actions can lead to the buyer entering into a contract based on false pretenses, resulting in default and significant damages. Advocating for the buyer to use a specific, less reputable lender because they offer a slightly lower interest rate on paper, without fully disclosing potential hidden fees or the lender's track record, is also a failure to act in the buyer's best interest. This approach prioritizes a superficial benefit over the buyer's overall financial well-being and security, potentially violating the salesperson's fiduciary duties. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Arkansas should approach financing discussions by focusing on facilitating the buyer's access to qualified financial experts. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, the buyer's best interests, and adherence to licensing regulations. This involves understanding the scope of their role as a real estate professional, which is to facilitate the transaction, not to provide financial or lending advice. When faced with financing questions, the professional course of action is to guide the client towards appropriate resources, such as mortgage brokers or lenders, and to encourage them to seek pre-approval to understand their borrowing capacity and the available loan products. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a real estate salesperson in Arkansas is assisting a first-time homebuyer who is concerned about their budget, but also wants to understand the long-term implications of their mortgage choice. Which approach best aligns with the salesperson's ethical and legal obligations in explaining mortgage options? Option A. Suggest an interest-only mortgage as a way for the buyer to maximize their cash flow in the short term, assuming they will be able to manage principal repayment later. Option B. Recommend an adjustable-rate mortgage due to its typically lower initial interest rate, as this will help the buyer manage their immediate budget concerns. Option C. Focus the discussion primarily on the advertised promotional rates for each mortgage type to highlight the most attractive initial payment options available. Option D. Conduct a detailed needs assessment to understand the buyer's financial situation and risk tolerance, then clearly explain the fundamental differences, benefits, and risks of fixed-rate, adjustable-rate, and interest-only mortgages, empowering the buyer to make an informed decision. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed needs assessment to understand the buyer's financial situation and risk tolerance, then clearly explain the fundamental differences, benefits, and risks of fixed-rate, adjustable-rate, and interest-only mortgages, empowering the buyer to make an informed decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to accurately explain complex mortgage products to a potential buyer without misrepresenting their terms or suitability. The challenge lies in ensuring the buyer fully understands the implications of each mortgage type, particularly the risks associated with adjustable-rate and interest-only mortgages, and making a recommendation that aligns with the buyer's financial situation and risk tolerance, all while adhering to Arkansas real estate licensing laws and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough needs assessment of the buyer's financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals, followed by a clear, unbiased explanation of the fundamental differences between fixed-rate, adjustable-rate, and interest-only mortgages. This approach prioritizes educating the client and empowering them to make an informed decision. Specifically, it would involve detailing how interest rates are determined for each type, the potential for payment fluctuations in adjustable-rate mortgages, and the principal repayment structure of interest-only loans. This aligns with Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-306, which mandates that licensees act honestly and truthfully and avoid misrepresentation. Ethical guidelines also require licensees to act in the best interest of their clients. Incorrect approaches analysis, recommending an adjustable-rate mortgage solely because it offers a lower initial payment without fully explaining the potential for future payment increases and the associated risks is a failure to act honestly and truthfully, violating Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-306. This misrepresentation could lead to financial hardship for the buyer. Suggesting an interest-only mortgage as a universally beneficial option without understanding the buyer's ability to manage principal repayment later or their long-term financial stability is also a breach of ethical duty and potentially misrepresents the product's suitability, as it does not amortize the principal during the interest-only period. Focusing exclusively on the advertised promotional rates of any mortgage type without discussing the underlying loan terms, potential fees, and long-term costs is a form of deceptive practice, failing to provide a complete and accurate picture as required by professional standards and Arkansas law. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach. This involves active listening to understand the client's needs, followed by clear, transparent communication. When discussing financial products like mortgages, the process should be educational, not persuasive. A structured approach would involve 1. Needs assessment, gathering comprehensive information about the client's financial capacity, risk appetite, and future plans. 2. Product education, explaining the core mechanics, benefits, and risks of each relevant mortgage type in plain language. 3. Suitability discussion, guiding the client to consider which product best aligns with their assessed needs, without making a definitive recommendation that could be construed as guaranteeing outcomes. 4. Disclosure, ensuring all relevant disclosures and terms are understood. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some mortgage loan originators in Arkansas are encountering applicants who are eager to expedite the loan process and may wish to omit certain financial details from their applications. An applicant in Little Rock has expressed a desire to leave fields related to their detailed monthly expenses blank, stating they believe it will speed up approval. As a licensed mortgage loan originator in Arkansas, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the application, leaving the detailed monthly expense fields blank, and inform the applicant that this information can be provided later if requested by the underwriter. Option B. Advise the applicant that omitting detailed monthly expenses is permissible to expedite the process, as long as they provide a general overview of their financial situation. Option C. Suggest to the applicant that they can simply state N/A for all detailed monthly expense fields to speed up the application, as this is a common practice. Option D. Politely explain to the applicant that all required fields on the mortgage application must be accurately completed, including detailed monthly expenses, as mandated by Arkansas and federal lending regulations, and offer to assist them in gathering this information. The correct answer is D. Politely explain to the applicant that all required fields on the mortgage application must be accurately completed, including detailed monthly expenses, as mandated by Arkansas and federal lending regulations, and offer to assist them in gathering this information. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a mortgage loan originator in Arkansas to navigate the delicate balance between client enthusiasm and regulatory compliance. The applicant's eagerness to secure a loan quickly, coupled with their desire to omit certain financial details, presents a direct conflict with the legal requirements for a complete and accurate mortgage application. Failing to adhere to these requirements can lead to significant legal repercussions for the originator and the applicant, including loan denial, penalties, and potential license suspension or revocation. The originator must exercise sound judgment to protect both the applicant's interests and their own professional integrity, all while operating within the specific framework of Arkansas law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously guiding the applicant through the entire mortgage application process, ensuring all required fields are accurately completed and all necessary documentation is provided. This approach prioritizes transparency and adherence to the Arkansas Mortgage Loan Originator Licensing Act and associated federal regulations. By explaining the necessity of each piece of information and the consequences of omissions, the originator educates the applicant and fulfills their legal obligation to obtain a complete and truthful application. This proactive and compliant method builds trust and mitigates risks for all parties involved. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the applicant's request to leave certain financial details blank. This directly violates the requirement for a complete and accurate mortgage application under Arkansas law and federal regulations like the Truth in Lending Act (TILA) and the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act (RESPA). Omitting information can lead to misrepresentation, which can result in loan denial, penalties, and disciplinary action against the loan originator's license. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the application without fully explaining the importance of the omitted information. While the applicant may be eager, the originator has a duty to inform them about the legal necessity of providing all requested financial data. Failing to do so demonstrates a lack of due diligence and can be construed as facilitating a potentially fraudulent application, which is a serious ethical and regulatory breach. A third incorrect approach is to advise the applicant that certain financial details are optional or can be provided later without proper clarification. This misrepresents the mandatory nature of the information required for a mortgage application. The originator must be clear that all requested information is essential for the underwriting process and for compliance with Arkansas and federal lending laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulations, specifically the Arkansas Mortgage Loan Originator Licensing Act and relevant federal statutes. They must then assess the applicant's request against these legal requirements. The core principle is to prioritize compliance and ethical conduct. This involves clear, direct communication with the applicant, explaining the why behind each requirement and the potential consequences of noncompliance. If an applicant is resistant, the professional should reiterate their obligations and, if necessary, decline to proceed with an incomplete application, advising the applicant on how to gather the required information. The ultimate goal is to facilitate a compliant and ethical transaction. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that a real estate agent in Little Rock, Arkansas, is assisting a landlord in screening potential tenants for a rental property. The landlord has expressed a desire to find tenants who are financially stable and unlikely to cause problems. Which of the following screening practices best adheres to Arkansas's fair housing laws and ethical professional conduct? Option A. Reviewing credit reports, verifying employment and income stability, and checking previous rental payment history for all applicants. Option B. Rejecting an applicant solely because they rely on public assistance for income. Option C. Inquiring about any past housing complaints the applicant may have filed against previous landlords. Option D. Asking applicants about their marital status and the number of children they have to gauge household stability. The correct answer is A. Reviewing credit reports, verifying employment and income stability, and checking previous rental payment history for all applicants. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in real estate, balancing the landlord's desire for a reliable tenant with the legal and ethical obligations to avoid discriminatory practices. The challenge lies in identifying legitimate risk factors without inadvertently screening out protected classes, which is a strict requirement under Arkansas law. The real estate professional must navigate this fine line to ensure compliance and ethical conduct. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a standardized, objective screening process that focuses solely on criteria directly related to a prospective tenant's ability to fulfill the lease obligations. This includes verifying income, employment stability, and rental history. By applying the same criteria to all applicants, the agent ensures fairness and avoids any appearance or reality of discrimination based on protected characteristics. This aligns with the principles of fair housing and the specific prohibitions against discrimination in Arkansas. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves inquiring about a prospective tenant's marital status and number of children. This is problematic because it can lead to indirect discrimination against families with children or single individuals, which are protected characteristics under fair housing laws. Even if the intent is not discriminatory, such questions can create a disparate impact. Another incorrect approach is to reject an applicant based on their reliance on public assistance. A landlord may have concerns about the stability of income. Explicitly rejecting an applicant solely because they receive public assistance can be considered discriminatory, especially if other income verification methods are not explored. Arkansas law, like federal law, aims to prevent discrimination based on source of income in many housing contexts. A third incorrect approach is to ask about a prospective tenant's past housing complaints. While a landlord might be concerned about potential future issues, focusing on past complaints without a clear, objective link to the applicant's current ability to be a good tenant can be a pretext for discrimination. The focus should remain on objective indicators of financial responsibility and adherence to lease terms. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective, non-discriminatory criteria. This involves developing a written screening policy that is applied consistently to all applicants. When in doubt about a particular screening criterion, professionals should consult with legal counsel specializing in fair housing and landlord-tenant law in Arkansas to ensure compliance. The goal is to assess risk based on financial capacity and past behavior directly related to tenancy, not on personal characteristics. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that during a listing presentation in Little Rock, Arkansas, a seller expresses a strong preference for their buyer to use a specific mortgage lender, stating they have a good relationship with that lender. As the listing agent, how should you ethically and legally respond to this request from the seller? Option A. Recommend the seller's preferred lender to the buyer, emphasizing that this lender is highly recommended by the seller. Option B. Politely decline the seller's request to recommend their preferred lender, explaining that you must ensure the buyer has the freedom to choose their own lender based on their best interests and market research. Option C. Inform the seller that you cannot discuss financing options with the buyer at all due to their request. Option D. Agree to recommend the seller's preferred lender to the buyer, but mention that the buyer is free to explore other options. The correct answer is B. Politely decline the seller's request to recommend their preferred lender, explaining that you must ensure the buyer has the freedom to choose their own lender based on their best interests and market research. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in real estate transactions, where a seller attempts to influence a buyer's choice of a specific service provider, potentially creating a conflict of interest and violating disclosure requirements under Arkansas real estate law. The professional challenge lies in navigating the seller's request while upholding fiduciary duties to the buyer and adhering to ethical and legal obligations. Careful judgment is required to ensure transparency and prevent any appearance of impropriety or undue influence. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves politely but firmly declining the seller's request to steer the buyer towards a specific lender. This approach upholds the agent's fiduciary duty to act in the buyer's best interest by ensuring the buyer receives objective advice and has the freedom to choose a lender based on their own research and preferences. This aligns with Arkansas regulations requiring licensees to treat all parties honestly and to avoid misrepresentation or concealment of material facts. Specifically, Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-304 mandates that licensees shall not mislead or deceive any party in a real estate transaction. Recommending a specific lender at the seller's behest could be construed as misleading the buyer into believing that this is the only or best option, potentially violating this duty. Incorrect approach is analysis. Directly complying with the seller's request to recommend their preferred lender without disclosure is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action prioritizes the seller's potential benefit, perhaps a kickback or referral fee, though not explicitly stated. It's an implied risk over the buyer's best interest and violates the duty of honesty and fair dealing. It creates a conflict of interest and could lead to the buyer selecting a lender that is not the most suitable or cost-effective for them. Suggesting the seller's preferred lender, but adding a disclaimer that the buyer is free to choose another lender, while seemingly mitigating the issue, still falls short. The initial recommendation, even with a disclaimer, carries weight and can unduly influence the buyer, especially if the agent has a strong relationship with the buyer. The Arkansas Real Estate Commission expects licensees to avoid situations that could be perceived as steering or undue influence. The mere act of recommending based on the seller's request, even with a caveat, can still be seen as a failure to act solely in the buyer's best interest. Refusing to discuss financing options altogether with the buyer, even if the seller is present, is also professionally problematic. While avoiding the seller's specific request, it neglects the agent's responsibility to guide the buyer through the transaction process, which includes understanding financing. A complete refusal to engage on this topic can leave the buyer feeling unsupported and could be interpreted as a lack of diligence or a failure to provide essential services within the scope of representation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing transparency and the client's best interests. When faced with a request that could create a conflict of interest or steer a client towards a specific service provider, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential conflict or undue influence. 2. Recalling and applying relevant ethical codes and state regulations. In this case, Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-42-304 and General Fiduciary Duties. 3. Communicating clearly and professionally with all parties involved, explaining limitations and obligations. 4. Offering objective information or resources rather than specific recommendations when a conflict exists. 5. Documenting all communications and decisions. Question 16. During the evaluation of a property in Little Rock, Arkansas, a real estate licensee learns that the property was inherited by two siblings from their parents. The inheritance documents do not contain any specific language indicating survivorship rights or an intent to create a joint tenancy. The siblings are now considering how the property will be handled in the future, including what happens if one of them passes away. Based on Arkansas law, what is the most accurate classification of their current ownership interest in the property? Option A, fee simple absolute. Option B, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Option C, leasehold. Option D, tenancy in common. The correct answer is D, tenancy in common. Explanation. 1. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the licensee to accurately identify and advise on the nuances of different property ownership types within Arkansas law. Misinterpreting or miscommunicating these distinctions can lead to significant legal and financial consequences for the client, potentially resulting in disputes over inheritance, sale proceeds, or liability. A clear understanding of Arkansas's property law is paramount. 2. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves accurately identifying the ownership structure as tenancy in common. This is correct because the scenario explicitly states that the property was inherited by two siblings, and there is no mention of survivorship rights or a specific agreement to hold title as joint tenants. In Arkansas, when property is inherited by multiple individuals without explicit designation otherwise, it is presumed to be held as tenancy in common. Each sibling has an undivided interest in the whole property, and their share passes to their heirs upon death, not automatically to the surviving sibling. This aligns with Arkansas Code Annotated Section 28-9-101 et seq. Concerning descent and distribution. 3. Incorrect approaches analysis. Identifying the ownership as joint tenancy with right of survivorship is incorrect because this form of ownership requires the express intent and creation of survivorship rights, which are not indicated in the scenario. Without clear language in the will or deed creating survivorship, the presumption is against it. This would fail to correctly advise the client on how the property will be distributed upon one sibling's death. Classifying the ownership as fee simple absolute is too broad and doesn't address the co-ownership aspect. While each sibling possesses a fee simple interest, the critical element here is how that interest is held with another party. This approach overlooks the specific co-ownership structure. Describing the ownership as leasehold is fundamentally incorrect. A leasehold interest is a right to occupy and use property for a defined period under a lease agreement, which is not the case for inherited property. This mischaracterization would completely misinform the client about their rights and responsibilities. 4. Professional reasoning. Professionals should first meticulously review all available documentation, including the will, deed, and any other relevant legal instruments, to ascertain the exact nature of the property ownership. They must then apply their knowledge of Arkansas property law, specifically the distinctions between tenancy in common, joint tenancy, and other forms of co-ownership, to the facts presented. If ambiguity exists, advising the client to seek legal counsel from a qualified Arkansas real estate attorney is the most responsible course of action. Question 17. What factors determine a real estate salesperson's ability to maintain an active license in Arkansas when facing an extended medical leave that prevents them from fulfilling their usual professional duties and continuing education requirements? Option A. Waiting until the license renewal period to address the lapse in continuing education and the extended absence from practice. Option B. Assuming the license will remain active as long as dues are paid, without informing the commission of the extended absence. Option C. Proactive communication with the Arkansas Real Estate Commission about the medical leave and seeking guidance on license status options. Option D. Relying on informal verbal updates to a fellow licensee about the medical situation. The correct answer is C. Proactive communication with the Arkansas Real Estate Commission about the medical leave and seeking guidance on license status options. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to navigate the nuances of maintaining an active license while dealing with personal circumstances that could impact their ability to fulfill licensing requirements. The core challenge lies in balancing professional obligations with personal life events, ensuring compliance with Arkansas Real Estate Commission (AREC) regulations to avoid license suspension or revocation. Careful judgment is required to proactively address potential compliance issues rather than reactively attempting to rectify them after a lapse. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively communicating with the Arkansas Real Estate Commission regarding any circumstances that might affect license status or continuing education compliance. This approach is correct because it aligns with the AREC emphasis on licensees keeping their information current and adhering to all statutory and regulatory requirements. Specifically, Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-32-201 and associated regulations mandate that licensees maintain their licenses in good standing and fulfill continuing education obligations. By informing the AREC of the extended medical leave, the salesperson demonstrates good faith, allows the commission to advise on potential license status options, such as inactive status or extensions for continuing education under specific circumstances, and prevents potential penalties for noncompliance. This proactive communication is the cornerstone of ethical and legally compliant practice. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to notify the Arkansas Real Estate Commission about the extended medical leave and assuming the license will remain active without any action is a significant regulatory failure. This approach disregards the AREC authority and the licensee's responsibility to maintain an active license, in accordance with Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-32-201. It can lead to the license lapsing due to non-compliance with renewal requirements or continuing education deadlines, resulting in penalties and the need to reapply for licensure. Assuming that a verbal notification to a colleague is sufficient to satisfy the Arkansas Real Estate Commission's reporting requirements is also an incorrect approach. AREC requires formal communication, typically in writing, to officially record changes in license status or to request accommodations. Relying on informal communication bypasses established regulatory procedures and leaves the licensee vulnerable to noncompliance. Waiting until the license renewal period to address the lapse in continuing education and the extended absence from active practice is a reactive and potentially detrimental strategy. While the AREC may have provisions for hardship cases, waiting until the renewal period significantly reduces the options available and increases the likelihood of penalties or the need to undergo the full licensing process again. As per Arkansas Code Annotated Section 17-32-201 and related continuing education rules. Professional reasoning. Professionals in real estate must prioritize transparency and proactive communication with their regulatory bodies. When facing personal circumstances that could impact license status or compliance, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential impact on licensing requirements, e.g., continuing education, renewal deadlines, active status. 2. Consulting the relevant regulations of the Arkansas Real Estate Commission, AREC, to understand specific obligations and available options. 3. Initiating prompt and formal communication with the AREC to report the circumstances and seek guidance on maintaining compliance or adjusting license status. 4. Documenting all communications and actions taken to ensure a clear record of compliance efforts. This systematic approach ensures that professional obligations are met, even during challenging personal times, and safeguards the integrity of the license. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that an Arkansas licensed real estate salesperson is tasked with providing a valuation for a standard single-family home in a well-established neighborhood. The property is not a unique architectural marvel, nor is it primarily held for rental income. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical obligations in Arkansas, which valuation method would be the most appropriate and professionally sound to employ in this situation? Option A, income approach. Option B, comparative market analysis. Option C, cost approach. Option D, a combination of all three approaches without specific justification for each. The correct answer is B, comparative market analysis. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common professional challenge for Arkansas real estate licensees, determining the most appropriate valuation method for a unique property. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that is both legally compliant with Arkansas real estate regulations and ethically sound, ensuring the valuation is fair and accurate for the client. Misapplication of valuation methods can lead to misrepresentation, breach of fiduciary duty, and potential legal repercussions under Arkansas law. Careful judgment is required to balance the client's needs with the objective application of valuation principles. Correct approach analysis. The most appropriate approach in this scenario is the comparative market analysis. This method involves comparing the subject property to similar recently sold properties in the same geographic area, adjusting for differences in features, condition, and amenities. Residential properties, especially those that are not highly specialized. This approach is generally favored by the Arkansas Real Estate Commission, AREC, and is considered the most reliable indicator of market value. AREC guidelines emphasize the importance of using data that is relevant and comparable to the subject property. This method directly reflects current market conditions and buyer preferences, providing a realistic estimate of what a buyer would likely pay. Incorrect approach is analysis. Using the income approach would be inappropriate and potentially misleading for a single-family residence that is not primarily an investment property. This approach focuses on the income-generating potential of a property, which is not the primary driver of value for most owner-occupied homes. Relying solely on this method could result in a valuation that does not align with what a typical buyer would be willing to pay for such a property, violating the principle of providing an accurate representation of market value as expected by AREC. The cost approach, which estimates the cost to replace or reproduce the property, is also not the best fit for this scenario. While useful for unique or newly constructed properties where comparable sales are scarce, it often overestimates value for older properties by not adequately accounting for depreciation or market desirability. For a standard residential property, this method can be less reflective of actual market demand and buyer behavior compared to the comparative market analysis, potentially leading to an inflated or inaccurate valuation. Professional reasoning. When faced with determining property value, Arkansas real estate licensees should first consider the nature of the property and its primary use. For standard residential properties, the comparative market analysis is the foundational method. Licensees must gather data on truly comparable properties, making objective adjustments for significant differences. If the property has unique characteristics or is an investment property, then considering the income or cost approach as supplementary or primary methods, respectively, might be warranted, but always with a critical eye towards how these methods reflect actual market realities and AREC expectations. The ultimate goal is to provide a valuation that is both accurate and defensible, upholding professional integrity and client trust. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the Arkansas real estate market has experienced a steady increase in property values over the past 2 years, with a notable surge in demand for single-family homes in suburban areas. A potential buyer, who has been pre-approved for a mortgage, is eager to purchase a home quickly. Considering the current real estate cycle and trends in Arkansas, which of the following represents the most prudent approach for a licensed real estate salesperson? Option A. Advise the buyer to proceed with an offer promptly, while also providing a detailed analysis of current market conditions, including potential risks associated with a market potentially nearing a peak, and discussing strategies for negotiation and long-term investment considerations. Option B. Focus solely on the buyer's pre-approval and immediate desire to purchase, suggesting they look at the widest possible range of available properties without discussing broader market cycle implications. Option C. Encourage the buyer to make an aggressive offer immediately to secure a property before prices rise further, emphasizing the strong upward trend as a guarantee of future appreciation. Option D. Recommend that the buyer wait for a potential market correction, citing the rapid price increases as unsustainable, and suggest focusing on areas with historically lower price growth. The correct answer is A. Advise the buyer to proceed with an offer promptly, while also providing a detailed analysis of current market conditions, including potential risks associated with a market potentially nearing a peak, and discussing strategies for negotiation and long-term investment considerations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate salesperson in Arkansas to interpret market signals and advise a client appropriately, balancing the client's immediate needs with the broader economic context of real estate cycles. Misinterpreting these cycles can lead to significant financial consequences for the client and potential professional repercussions for the salesperson. Careful judgment is required to avoid making recommendations based on short-term fluctuations that might not align with long-term market realities. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive analysis of current market data, historical trends, and economic indicators specific to the Arkansas real estate market. This includes understanding where the market is in its cycle: expansion, peak, contraction, trough, and how that impacts property values, demand, and interest rates. A salesperson employing this approach would then use this informed perspective to guide the client's decision-making, emphasizing realistic expectations and strategic timing based on the observed cycle. This aligns with the Arkansas real estate license law and commission rules, which mandate that licensees act with honesty, integrity, and competence, providing clients with accurate and relevant information to make informed decisions. An incorrect approach involves solely focusing on recent price increases without considering the broader market cycle. This could lead to advising a client to purchase a property at a market peak, potentially exposing them to significant depreciation if the market enters a contraction phase. This fails to meet the professional standard of care and could violate the duty to represent the client's best interests by not providing a complete picture of market dynamics. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss current market conditions entirely and solely rely on historical averages, without acknowledging that real estate markets are cyclical and influenced by current economic factors. This ignores the dynamic nature of the market and could lead to outdated advice, potentially causing a client to miss opportune moments or make ill-timed decisions. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in staying abreast of current market trends. Finally, an incorrect approach is to base recommendations solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of other agents without independent verification or analysis of objective market data. This is unprofessional and unreliable, as anecdotal information can be biased and not representative of the overall market. It fails to uphold the licensee's responsibility to provide informed advice grounded in factual market analysis. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes data-driven analysis, understanding of market cycles, and client-specific goals. This involves continuous learning about market indicators, consulting reliable data sources, and applying this knowledge to provide strategic, well-informed advice that considers both short-term opportunities and long-term market realities within the specific context of Arkansas. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that a property in Little Rock, Arkansas, has sold for $350,000. The listing broker and the cooperating broker had a prior agreement to split the total commission equally, with the listing broker receiving 50% and the cooperating broker receiving 50%. The total commission rate agreed upon between the seller and the listing broker was 6% of the sale price. What is the amount of commission the cooperating broker will receive? Option A, $9,500. Option B, $10,000. Option C, $11,500. Option D, $10,500. Correct answer is D, $10, 500. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in real estate brokerage where a licensee must accurately calculate and allocate commission splits based on a complex agreement. The professional challenge lies in ensuring mathematical accuracy, adherence to the brokerage agreement, and compliance with Arkansas real estate license law regarding commission handling and record keeping. These calculations can lead to disputes with cooperating brokers, clients, and even regulatory scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously calculating the total commission based on the sale price, and then applying the agreed-upon split percentages to determine each party's share. This approach ensures transparency, accuracy, and adherence to the contractual obligations between the listing broker and the cooperating broker. Arkansas Real Estate Commission, AREC. Regulations emphasize the importance of clear and accurate commission agreements and proper disbursement of funds. Specifically, Rule 3.10 of the Arkansas Real Estate Commission Rules and Regulations mandates that all funds received by a broker must be handled in accordance with the brokerage agreement and dispersed promptly and accurately. This method directly aligns with these requirements by first establishing the total commission and then precisely dividing it according to the predetermined terms. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to estimate the commission split based on a general understanding of market rates. This is professionally unacceptable because it disregards the specific, legally binding agreement between the brokers. It violates the principle of fulfilling contractual obligations and could lead to underpayment or overpayment, creating disputes and potential legal ramifications. Furthermore, it fails to comply with AREC requirement for adherence to brokerage agreements. Another incorrect approach is to calculate the commission based on the net sale price after deducting closing costs. This is also professionally unacceptable because commission agreements are typically based on the gross sale price unless explicitly stated otherwise. Deducting closing costs without a clear agreement is a misinterpretation of the commission structure and a violation of the agreed-upon terms. This deviates from standard practice and the explicit terms of the brokerage agreement, potentially leading to disputes and regulatory issues. A further incorrect approach is to arbitrarily assign a higher percentage to the listing broker because they secured the listing. This is professionally unacceptable as it introduces bias and ignores the agreed-upon split outlined in the cooperative brokerage agreement. Commission splits are a matter of contract, and deviating from them without mutual consent is unethical and a violation of the agreement. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and professionalism, potentially damaging the reputation of the licensee and their brokerage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize clear written agreements and meticulous mathematical accuracy. When faced with commission calculations, the decision-making framework should involve 1. Reviewing the brokerage agreement to understand the exact terms of the commission split. 2. Identifying the gross sale price. 3. Applying the agreed-upon percentages to the gross sale price to calculate each party's share. 4. Verifying the calculations to ensure accuracy. 5. Disbursing funds strictly according to the agreement and AREC regulations. This systematic approach minimizes errors, ensures fairness, and upholds professional and regulatory standards.